Asia News.
Navy films of Task Force 58 under Vice Admiral Mark A. Mitcher as it proceeds through heavy seas on its way toward the Tokyo area. Objective is to tie down the Japanese Air Force so that it can't intercept the large force of transports, landing craft, and supply ships heading northward for landings on Iwo Jima. Approaching the target. Weather conditions continue adverse. 16th February. Pilots leave the briefing room on their way to the planes. Takeoffs are imperiled by the heavy seas. "1,500 planes take part in the attack. Heavy storm clouds blanket the Tokyo area. Mount Fujiyama. One of our planes strafes a ship in the harbor. Comes an enemy interceptor. Japanese aircraft factories are struck heavily. The attack continues for more than 9 hours. The next day, it's followed up with another attack lasting more than 8 hours. Throughout the attacks, the enemy offers only slight resistance. Our losses amount to 9 fighter planes and 4 pilots. 4 of Japan's largest and most important engine and assembly plants received devastating blows during the 2-day strike. Strafing planes caught on the airfields. About 2,000 are found on the ground. Altogether, 659 enemy planes are destroyed in the air and on the ground. While the enemy is being wiped out at the northern end of Iwo, supplies pour into the southern beaches. By 13th March, our casualties total more than 18,000, including almost 4,000 dead. Enemy dead total nearly 20,000. Evacuating wounded men to a hospital ship. Mopping up operations continue to unearth Japanese hiding in the many caves dug in the cliffs and sides of volcanoes. 2 Japs were killed in front of this cave trying to fight their way out. The remaining 3 are taken prisoner after hiding 10 days. They appear weak from lack of water. After stripping and searching them, military police marched them to the stockade for questioning. Many of the Japanese gun installations are in caves 30 to 40 feet deep. The small exposed part blends so well with the surroundings that they can't be discovered until they open fire. Even then, the heaviest bombs, including 12,000-pound AP, frequently have no effect. Many of the emplacements are so situated that they could not be hit from the sea or the air. Infantry had to wipe them out. A B-29 makes an emergency landing. Returning from a mission, the bomber would have had to land in the ocean if EO hadn't been taken. Infantry and tank units of Company I, 503rd Paratroop Regiment mop up on Corregidor. Jap sniper and machine gun pockets in the hills near Breakwater Point are destroyed by our troops moving against strong enemy resistance. Guns from American destroyers pour shells into the area to cover the paratroopers' advance. Machine gun fire reduces Jap positions. Troops of Company F, 503rd Paratroop Regiment, close in on a fortified artillery magazine. An 81mm mortar fires smoke shells on a Jap strong point to identify the target for bombing. Low-flying planes strafe the enemy. A blown-up powder magazine destroyed by the Japs to halt our advance. Companies A and B of the 1st Battalion on a patrol mission were trapped and wiped out in the explosion. A knocked-out U.S. tank and a dead American soldier. Troops of the 3rd Battalion moving up to replace the 1st Battalion pass American ambulances wrecked in the explosion. Fire Direction Center of a Parachute Field Artillery Battalion controlling gunfire on the eastern part of Corregidor. A heavy artillery barrage prepares the way for the infantry advance. Patrols move along the beach at Rock Point, cleaning out enemy pockets in caves and cliffs. Japanese suicide boats found along the shoreline of Corregidor. Each boat had a one-man crew and carried a 300-pound charge of dynamite. Several of our ships were rammed and sunk by the boats. PT boats crossed Manila Bay to Corregidor, bringing General Douglas MacArthur to the island for flag-raising ceremonies. General MacArthur is met at the dock by Colonel George M. Jones, commanding officer of the 503rd Regiment. Inspecting the large coastal defense guns at Wheeler Battery overlooking the entrance to Manila Bay. The General enters the west end of Malinta Tunnel. General MacArthur arrives at the site of the flag-raising ceremony near the ruins of the officers' quarters. During the ceremony, General MacArthur cited the 503rd Regimental Combat Team for brilliant action on Corregidor and presented Colonel Jones with a Distinguished Service Cross. The American flag is raised on Corregidor for the first time since 22nd March 1942. In his speech, General MacArthur called the recapture of Corregidor one of the most brilliant exploits in all military history and enjoined the troops to hoist the colors and let no enemy ever haul them down. Chinese-owned and operated junks carrying supplies on the Yunning River, China. The junks are pulled upstream by teams of coolies. When the junks reach a point in the narrow river canyons where fast-flowing rapids make the job too strenuous for a single team, the boats are temporarily anchored, and the coolie teams combine efforts to pull a single boat at a time through the difficult stretch. The coolies chant a song similar to that of the Volga boatmen to help them pull in unison. Shortage of normal facilities forces our Army to use every available means of Chinese transportation. These coolie carts are used to bring empty gasoline drums from the airfield to various alcohol factories. Alcohol is the main fuel for American convoys and has to be transported from the factories about 150 miles to our supply base. Filled drums in the storehouse. The drums are reshipped by means of mule cart trains. Arriving at the American convoy station near our supply base, a GI and a Chinese contractor check the load. Filling the tank of a convoy truck. A convoy on the way to the alcohol factories waits to be ferried across the Luho River. Oars made of unshaped poles reveal the extremely primitive facilities in use. Reaching the other side of the river, observers report this to be the sort of transportation our armies will encounter as they penetrate the interior of China. Troops bivouacking in the hills bordering the Burma Road show originality in building temporary homes for themselves. These crude but comfortable shelters are known as bashas. Some bashas are simply tents made of canvas or parachute silk coverings. Others are more elaborately constructed, even to having indoor fireplaces with hollow bamboo smokestacks. The wooden frames of the shelters are made of timber chopped in the nearby woods. The bashas are usually covered with canvas mantas, which were originally used for wrapping pack mule cargo. A few are large enough to accommodate 4 men. A wash basin stand. Bamboo wood with which the area abounds is used for everything. The shower bath is also constructed of bamboo, which resists rotting from water or dampness. The bamboo makes excellent furniture. This bed, when covered with straw or other mattress material, will furnish comfortable sleeping accommodations. Tables and chairs are made from the resilient wood, which can be easily cut with machete or GI knife. Rope to tie the pieces together is obtained from parachutes. Since the troops are supplied mostly by air, plenty of chutes are available for building purposes. Shelters are constructed with any materials at hand. Roofs are even made of burlap feed bags and corrugated box sides. These bashas show that the soldiers have been able to make even the wild Burma jungle livable. The T-26 heavy tank. It is characterized by a sloping V-shaped front and a very low silhouette. Because of its similarity to some German tanks, troops are cautioned to familiarize themselves thoroughly with the T-26's characteristic turret and body outlines. It crosses trenches as wide as 8 feet. Climbs any grade up to 60%. The new tank uses an individually sprung torsion bar suspension. A center-guided all-metal track 24 inches wide is used on the T-26. Power is supplied by a V8 liquid-cooled type engine with a gross horsepower of 500 at 2,600 RPM. The tank commander's cupola has a torsion spring which makes the door easy to open and close, so that the tank commander can look directly out when his door is closed. The cupola is equipped with 6 vision blocks as well as a revolving periscope. The E3 model mounts the 90mm gun M3. Additional modifications will embody even more powerful weapons. The muzzle brake and especially a new hydrospring mechanism reduce recoil to a minimum. There's space for storing 60 rounds of ammunition. 10 ready rounds are on the turret walls. On the First Army front, a newly arrived T-26E3 is inspected by General Hodges and his staff officers. Increasing numbers of these tanks are seeing extensive action in the Rhine offensives. North of Trier in the lower Moselle Valley, units of General Patton's Third Army battle their way through the Eifel Hills, straightening a line running 35 miles up to the fallen enemy base of Perang. Early in March, the 11th Armored Division, in conjunction with the 4th Infantry Division, pushes forward preparatory to a jump-off from the Kill River above the Moselle to the Rhine. German positions in the hills above Trier are brought under fire. This offensive, which began late in February when armor and infantry crossed the Moselle and began clearing out the Moselle-Saar Triangle, is to result in the collapse of last enemy territory west of the Rhine. Nazi prisoners seek cover from the fires of German batteries. They were captured at Ost, Germany, northeast of Perm. This action is well beyond the Siegfried Line, which the Third Army has smashed at all points north of Trier. The drive to Cologne. On the approaches to Germany's fourth largest city, the enemy had prepared huge roadblocks to be rolled into position when First Army troops struck from the northern and southern outskirts. On 5th March, men of the 3rd Armored Division eliminate pockets of resistance in the suburban towns of Pulheim and Bochemund. A total of 15 villages around Cologne are taken in the advance on the city. The few remaining civilians seek the shelter of our lines as street fighting intensifies. Troops under Major General Maurice Rose quickly batter down the spotty opposition to their penetration of the Cologne city limits. Augmenting the two First Army units which had crossed the Ruhr at Düren, the Third Army spearheaded the drive due east, reaching the Rhine downstream from Cologne before turning south for this rush toward the city. The streets of Cologne are not far ahead. Tanks and infantry press forward on the road leading directly into the heart of the besieged metropolis. The cathedral spires gradually loom closer as the advancing column continues its uninterrupted approach. There is some machine gun fire and occasional shells, but little concerted resistance. At the underpass into the city, the Nazis have set up a barricade consisting of disabled streetcars and heavy iron beams. E and A companies of the 36th Armored Infantry Regiment are first to reach this roadblock, and they rapidly remove its many components. A tank dozer is utilized to pull out the streetcars blocking the underpass. In 45 minutes, the barrier has been removed and armor rolls into the city proper. The Germans are holding out in various strong points and bomb-shattered buildings. Most of the opposition comes from regular troops. Our units report no house-to-house resistance by the Volkssturm. The enemy is pursued from street to street. Those attempting to flee in motor cars are repeatedly fired upon. Snipers are routed from their positions. Tank suffers a direct hit, and the crew leaps from the flames. Concussion rocks the handheld camera with its telephoto lens. Nearby, the shell of the cathedral is still standing, almost intact except for holes in the roof. The edifice received no direct bomb hits in approximately 25 all-out raids on Cologne. Inside, the 700-year-old cathedral is bare, its religious relics having been removed to places of safety. 15 miles south of Cologne, the First Army captures Bonn. The enemy barely had time to blow up the span across the Rhine. 2 Nazi engineers were trapped on the bridge after placing the charge. Even as the 1st Division takes Bonn, the 9th Division, which has been fighting at its side through 2 years of far-flung campaigning, smashes into Bad Godesberg. This city, 12 miles south of Bonn, is captured on the morning of 8th March. The normal population was 23,000. In 1938 at Godesberg, Hitler and Neville Chamberlain met in this building prior to the Munich Conference, at which the dismemberment of Czechoslovakia was formally ratified. Establishing the Remagen bridgehead, vehicles in long line move up to the span named after General Ludendorff. Nazi plans called for demolition of this bridge between Remagen on the west bank and Erpel on the east. But on 7th March, 9th Armored Division patrols removed the charges before serious damage could be done, and we had a bridge intact over the Rhine. Tanks and infantry crossed to capture Erpel and surrounding high ground before pushing on inland. The bridge's railroad tracks have been planked over for vehicular traffic. Our ACAC opposes persistent enemy attempts to dive bomb the Ludendorff Bridge. The bridgehead rapidly expands. This marks the first breaching of the Rhine River line since Napoleon crossed in 1805. Miles north of the Remagen bridgehead, air and ground assaults mark the 9th Army's drive to the Rhine opposite Dusseldorf. A tank of the 2nd Armored Division opens fire. Lieutenant General Simpson's troops drive closer to the remainder of Field Marshal Montgomery's 21st Army Group, the British 2nd Army and the Canadian 1st. Striking from the Neuss area, where 3 bridges have been blown, the 9th Army gains control of the 13 miles of the Rhine's west bank. Firing on enemy barges in the Rhine before Dusseldorf. In the meantime, meantime, the 35th Infantry Division, after taking the town of Geltern, Germany, moves forward to make contact with British units advancing down from the north. Men of the 35th meet Tommies of a Welsh division. Bicycles are used by elements of the 84th Infantry Division along roads opposite Duisburg. The two-wheelers are abandoned as they strike out across somewhat rugged Rhineland terrain. A combined Anglo-American drive further north is reducing the enemy's West Bank bridgehead opposite Wesel, paving the way for new Rhine crossings north of the Ruhr. Tanks participate in the routing of last enemy forces fleeing to the East Bank. The battle for the town of Gay-Nen, due west of Duisburg. Less than 3 weeks after this action, the 21st Army Group is across the northern Rhine. Films from the gun cameras of 8th Air Force fighter planes show destruction of enemy air opposition over the Western Front. Trains and other ground objectives. A pick-a-back plane is caught on the ground. A group of pick-a-back planes on the way toward the Allied lines are intercepted by P-51s of the 8th Air Force. The pick-a-backs are a combination of a Focke-Wulf 190 fighter on top of a Junkers 88 twin-engine bomber. The bomber is filled with high explosive and released near the target like a bomb. The Focke-Wulf 190 controls the flight of both planes, each of which provides its own power. Fighter squadron discovers an enemy airfield covered with planes. The strike systematically destroys every single plane. A rest haven behind the 7th Army lines in eastern France. By the truckload, infantry troops bear down on their objective. A week of relaxation in a French town the troops have renamed Shangri-La. Prior to this temporary release from combat duty, most of these men had known only the shelter of a foxhole during 135 consecutive days of combat from the Riviera beachhead to the Rhine. The free modern hotels which make up the quarters at this rest camp are named for the Infantry Division's 5 winners of the Congressional Medal of Honor. Like at a church supper in the old frontier days, the GIs checked their rifles at the door. No more M1s for the rest of 7 days. A tour of the grounds reveals all kinds of possibilities. For tired, aching muscles, there's a treatment any medic would endorse. A half-hour's hot dunking in the sulfur water of a famous French spa. The clothing exchange where the vacationing GIs swap battle-worn gear for a brand-new issue. Heavy outer garments which cannot be exchanged are laundered and returned at the end of the week. First on the schedule, a real bed. Sleep on a thick, soft mattress in a real bed ranks highest with rest camp visitors. There are definitely no gigs for getting up late in the morning. Being late for breakfast is no problem. A snack bar tides you over until the noon hour meal. The PX has everything. Day rooms are equipped with a customary variety of games. The Red Cross Lounge, for reading or just taking it easy, or daydreaming. Time for a show. Latest movies from Hollywood are shown. A one-horse open sleigh. A couple of days ago, they were at the front lugging field packs through the snow. Ski yawing, a tonic for battle-weary minds. No mess kits, no field rations. Only music and French waitresses and steak and all the trimmings. Dances are held twice weekly, with plenty of partners to go around. Almost to a man, they insist on maintaining contact with the war. After all, their buddies are still out there. 6 days of rest, and then back to the front. It's not easy to go back after living country club style, but there's another batch of soldiers anxious to get a taste of it. So long, Shangri-La. It was great while it lasted. Preliminary to the 21st Army Group's northern Rhine crossings, Field Marshal Montgomery confers with Lieutenant General Simpson of the 9th Army and Major General Anderson, 16th Corps Commander. Extensive preparations and training precede the Anglo-American offensive. Bailey Bridge equipment, collapsible boats, rafts, pontons, all earmarked for a Rhine assault, are stacked up in a forest clearing. This bridging dump is maintained by Canadian units awaiting the signal to commence operations against the Reich River barrier. At Maastricht, Holland, LCMs brought down the canal from Antwerp are loaded onto M25 trailers for transportation to the bridgehead sector. American and British naval forces have chosen the LCM and LCVP as suited to Army requirements and capable of being transported overland. Alligators also are delivered for rehearsing troops of the 30th Division 9th Army. The Meuse River is used for Army-Navy training. Instead of operating craft of this type through waves and surf, seamen must learn to maneuver them to and from pinpoint landing spots in currents ranging from 6 to 10 knots. Boats must be launched from muddy riverbanks instead of ships' davits. Preparations for the airborne operations coordinated with the amphibious assault. Elements of the 1st Allied Airborne Army drill in France 10 days before Lieutenant General Brereton's aerial task forces converge on the Rhine. March. The actual crossing of the Rhine already is in full swing. Men of the 30th Division are taken over in LCVPs. General Simpson's forces make the southernmost crossing below Basel. Farther north, Lieutenant General Dempsey's British Second Army and Canadian troops are strengthening the bridgehead on the Westphalian Plain. Army engineers and Navy crews cooperate for these crossings. The engineers launch the craft and furnish guides, and the sailors operate them, applying lessons learned in weeks of practice. A jeep with ammunition trailer comes ashore, followed by reinforcements of all types for advance elements moving beyond the east bank of the Rhine. Operations are reported proceeding according to plan, with our troops well into the first German defensive positions north of the Ruhr. First glider landings near Brunn, Germany, in the Wesel area on the Rhine's far bank. Coming in after Marshal Montgomery's columns have been launched across the Rhine, these units have the immediate objective of seizing high ground around Wesel. A junction with the American and British troops is made 6 hours after the airborne troops commence to land. To the south, the 4th Armored Division, spearheading General Patton's Rhine push, passes liberated forced laborers. The disorder of the German retreat is made evident by groups of Nazis giving themselves up without offering resistance. This dash by the 4th Armored precedes the final battle for the Saar-Moselle-Rhine Triangle and Third Army crossings of the Rhine. The town of Weissenturm, Germany, is littered with equipment of every description, abandoned by the Nazis as they were backed up to the river. A preponderance of horses, dead and alive, adds to the scene of confusion. Disorder at the Rhine bank, where Nazi stragglers wait to be moved to prisoner cages. The 4th Armored alone captures more than 4,000 prisoners in its drive through the West German hills. Meanwhile, 1st Army artillery shells the town of Hornigen, Germany, across the Rhine. This is in support of an infantry division moving along the east bank from the Remagen bridgehead 7 miles north. On 16th March, a treadway bridge is used by troops consolidating positions across the Rhine. General Hodge's army, driving for the central German plain, also employs Navy craft to move up reinforcements. LCVPs transport men of the 1st Infantry Division to Scheuren, Germany, northeast of Remagen. Sailors of Navy units attached to the 1st Army operate the craft. The Navy began operations in this area 48 hours after the Army's seizure of the Ludendorff Bridge. Additional supplies are ferried across the Rhine in ducks. 2 amphibious truck companies, 1 a Negro outfit, man the amphibious vehicles on the runs to and from Unkel, Germany. Prisoners of war and empty gasoline containers are carted by the ducks on their return trips. The Ludendorff Bridge across the Rhine at Remagen. For 10 days it withstands aerial attacks and constant artillery fire while 1st Army troops exploit the initial breaching of the Rhine River line. Traffic in the face of the attacks must be kept to proper intervals between vehicles. The convoy convoy of ponton equipment is ready to be unloaded for engineer battalions who begin construction despite the enemy raids. Normally a 34-hour job, the bridging operations are hours behind as Nazi fire flares up repeatedly. Under heavy enemy fire, combat engineers out on the incompleted span dash back to shore. Despite these attacks, the first ponton bridge is completed and handling heavy traffic on 14th March. Armor is raced across the new link as the Remagen bridgehead begins expanding into a wide front. Both the ponton span and the adjacent Ludendorff bridge are still under enemy fire. The engineer battalion working on the Ludendorff strengthens the roadbed, which was improvised to allow vehicles to travel over the railway ties. Damaged structural members of the bridge are removed by engineers. But weakened by the cumulative damage, the Ludendorff collapses on 17th March while about 300 engineer troops are working on it. Many of them are hurled into the swift icy water or crushed by the falling structure. Rescue crews save those who managed to cling to sections of the span as it gave way. Rescuers swim out into the Rhine to reach injured men kept afloat by driftwood. Bringing out a line to pull in the surviving engineers. Quick action of this type saves many lives. When the 512-foot center span of the Ludendorff gave way, there was no vehicular traffic crossing the bridge. Crews extricate bodies pinned beneath the heavy beams. Three days later, on 20th March, Supreme Headquarters announces that the collapsed Ludendorff Bridge has been abandoned. The dispatch says that the span is no longer necessary because of the existence of other facilities across the Rhine into the Remagen bridgehead. RAF films of the jet-propelled Gloucester Meteor, British counterpart of the American jet plane, the P-80 Shooting Star. The Meteor, powered by two Rolls-Royce engines, was first used to combat Nazi robot bombs. Although still in the early stages of experimentation, the plane has proved to be faster than the 500-mile-an-hour buzz bombs. Smooth running, easy to fly, and practically noiseless, the Meteor leaves almost no trail of smoke. Known as the squirt by RAF pilots, the plane climbs like an elevator and increases its speed in high altitudes. Main component of the M69 bomb, a cheesecloth sock containing specially processed jellied gasoline. When ignited, the gel filling becomes a clinging fiery mass spreading more than a yard in diameter. It burns at approximately 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit for 8 to 10 minutes. The bomb was developed by the National Defense Research Council in collaboration with the Chemical Warfare Service. In a demonstration, it is fired electrically from the ground against a wall. For airdrops, the M69 is assembled in groups of 38. The E-23 adapter is used in forming 500-pound aimable clusters carried by planes equipped to handle this size bomb. On the assembly line at Mays Landing, New Jersey, the bombs are secured inside the cylindrical halves of the cluster wall. The bomb is held together by 9 steel straps attached to release buckles, which are broken open by time fuses within the fin assembly. The clusters are given high and low altitude tests at Edgewood Arsenal with a B-25 loading the 500-pounders. The cluster is released and opened, and the individual bombs with gauze streamers trailing drop toward the target. On impact, an M1 fuse detonates the ejection charge, which ignites and hurls the gel filling from the tail of the bomb. Another drop of the jellied gasoline bombs. The M69 saw extensive use in the March fire raids on Tokyo and Nagoya. There is also the M47, containing about the same type incendiary material, but packaged as a 100-pound unit. American-trained Chinese First Army troops drive on Lashio. Bulldozers clear the way for tanks and infantry advancing on the ancient city, main terminus of the Burma Road. The Nam Yao River is crossed at the site of a blown-out railroad bridge about 2 miles from the city. Lashio, prior to the main attack, bombed and gutted by planes of the 10th Air Force. Strategic importance of Lashio is its railway facilities connecting it with Mandalay and other Burma cities. Troops of the Chinese First Army occupy Lashio and its adjoining airstrip 7th March. The Japanese offered only slight resistance before withdrawing. A captured Japanese machine gun, one of the many weapons abandoned by the enemy in his hasty retreat. Thousands of gasoline drums are strewn over the airstrip. Negro troops of an anti-aircraft battalion quickly set up their guns along the captured runway. Enemy pillboxes built near the field are constructed with 3 separate compartments for greater protection against shell hits. Wreckage of old Japanese and American planes and engines found in many of the 102 revetments along the airstrip. This dummy was painted and then placed near the edge of the airfield to draw fire from our strafing and bombing planes. A railroad engine, cleverly hidden and camouflaged by the Japs. Lieutenant General Daniel I. Sultan and Chinese commanders at Lashio Railroad Yard. In a pincer movement, coordinated with the Chinese First Army drive on Lashio, British troops advance on Mandalay. Abandoned railroad cars of the important Mandalay-Lashio Railway. Sikhs, Punjabis, and Gurkhas of a predominantly Indian division strike toward the city in heat which exceeds 130 degrees. A wounded Jap, one of the few captured alive in the British advance. The Jap garrison is under attack from north, south, east, and west. Mandalay Hill, a Buddhist holy spot and used by the Japs as a key observation post, is brought under artillery and tank fire. After capture of the hill, British and Indian troops with tank support move up for an attack on Fort Dufferin in the heart of the city. Frontal attack fails to break through the walls and moats surrounding Fort Dufferin. British big guns are brought up to breach the 30-foot walls, which are blasted with 100-pound shells from 4.5-inch howitzers. A battalion, supported by tanks firing point blank at the main gate, smashes against the fortifications. Japs holed up and barricaded behind the wall, drive the attackers back with machine gun fire. Several of our tanks are knocked out in the action. Flanking movements feel out weak points in enemy positions. The last remaining center of Jap resistance in Mandalay, the fort is fanatically defended in a 12-day siege. Fall of Fort Dufferin and Mandalay takes place 20th March after almost 3 years of Japanese occupation. Overlooking the initial beachhead from Mount Suribachi. D-Day +5. Shelling the ridge bordering the number 2 airstrip. Tanks close in on the Japs dug in the caves along the ridge. Mortar crews is knocked out. All except 1 Marine are killed. The ridge protecting the airstrip is stubbornly defended. A tank flamethrower goes into action against one of the many pillboxes covering the ridge. Demolition crew placing charges at the entrance of a blockhouse. Rocket launcher mounted on a truck in action against Jap positions along the ridge. Troops sweep across the plateau above the airstrip. Heavy mortar and rifle fire blocks the approaches to the field, and the slight gains are made at heavy cost in lives. Jap trenches along the ridge remain the last obstacle before the airstrip. Seizure of the ridge puts the airstrip and surrounding enemy positions under direct fire of our guns. Crossing the number 2 airstrip passes some of our damaged vehicles. Air Corps films of Iwo Jima from a C-47 bringing in supplies from Saipan. Circling Mount Suribachi for a landing on airstrip number 1. 4 more C-47s follow the first one in. Each plane carries 13 packs containing 17 mortar shells. The first P-51 lands on airstrip number 1. P-51s on EO. Fighter support for B-29s attacking the Japanese mainland. Navy films of a carrier strike at the Ryukyu Islands, 360 miles south of Japan. Aircraft carriers, battleships, cruisers, and other units of Admiral Raymond A. Spruance's powerful Fifth Fleet battle through heavy seas. They penetrate deep into territory considered by the enemy as part of the Japanese mainland. Hundreds of bombers and fighters take off from the decks of the task force carriers. A protective umbrella of Hellcats and Corsairs is thrown around the fleet, while Avenger torpedo planes and Helldiver bombers sweep inland. Jap coastal ships are caught offshore and destroyed. Warships and cargo vessels anchored in the island harbor and breakwater are strafed and sunk. Military and naval installations along the shore are pounded by the Navy's HE rockets and 50 caliber guns. The big airstrip is raked by heavy fire. Jap planes are destroyed on the ground. Back at the fleet, Jap aircraft strike at our ships. The few remaining Jap planes that get through our fighter cordon run into intense anti-aircraft fire. The strike precedes the invasion of Okinawa Island by the 10th Army on 1st April.
Malaysia News.